Hi everyone, welcome to our Applied Finance Centre webinar for today. We're really excited to have you here and we've got a jam-packed schedule ready for you. You'll see down at the bottom of your screen there's a Q&A section, so you're welcome to put your questions in there and we have a team ready to answer them throughout the webinar. Otherwise, you can hold your questions till the end and we'll have a live Q&A with our speakers in the last 15 minutes. So I'll quickly jump to our agenda for today and let you know what we're covering. Firstly, we've got our alumni, Morgan Ellis. We'll have a quick Q&A with him and Lindsay will jump in and ask him about his experience studying with us here at Macquarie. Following that, Lindsay's going to run through some hot topics in finance at the moment, particularly with what's happening in the current climate and why it's so important that you study finance to get ahead in your career. Following that, we've got Larissa who's joining us. She's also another one of our alumni, currently working at KPMG. She's going to share some of her insights and experiences studying with us here at Macquarie. Lindsay will then jump through and let you know some details about our degrees, particularly our grad cert, and then we'll throw to our live Q&A. So we'll kick off with introducing Morgan, if you can see him on the screen there. Hi, Morgan. Morgan is one of our alumni and he's currently the Vice President at MSCI in the ESG research area. Hi, Morgan, how are you going?
Hi, Ashley. I'm going well, thanks.
That's good. Thanks so much for joining us. Have you got a busy day at work?
Yeah, it's as busy as any other. Constant calls and emails and lots of stuff to go on, even though we're stuck at home.
Excellent. All right, well, I'll just jump to the first question. Are you able to share with us your Master of Applied Finance journey and let us know really what made you decide to choose to study that degree and where it's led your career to date?
Yeah, sure. So really, this course gave me the tools I needed to change careers at that time. So I started my professional life as a solar energy engineer. I did sustainability consulting for engineering consulting firms. So I've always had a sort of analytical and environmental approach to what I do. But I got to the point where I got worn out by arguing with architects and developers about getting the minimum level of energy efficiency design aspects into buildings. So I wanted to have a bit more of an impact on the world rather than arguing about insulation thicknesses or glass colors. So after a while, I realized that I wanted to combine, try and do something that had more impact and combine environmental aspect of my work and financial or investment activities. So having had no financial or investment background, either in study or professionally, I tried to see what I could do to make that transition happen. And after talking to a number of different people, I landed on doing the Master of Applied Finance. And a couple of things that swayed me towards that decision was I found that the reputation of the course was quite high within the investment industry. So I worked out that if I had this degree, people would be able to recognize it and respect it without having to know too much more about me. The flexibility in completing the coursework actually worked really well in my favor while doing it because I was working full-time at the time. A couple of months before I started, I had my first child. And then halfway through the course, I had another child. So flexibility was essential as I was doing it. And I guess the in-city campus helped the structure of having to be able to talk to people because I didn't know too much about finance at the time, and working with other students as well to work through the problems. So it really gave me what I needed to transition into my current role and give me the credibility I needed to present for the jobs that I wanted to get.
Fabulous, and nice to know that you're able to juggle the family commitments and the work commitments and study as well. How did you find that balance between the three? And did you feel you were well supported while you were studying by your workplace and also by the teachers?
The support was support from everyone was really good. My work was supportive at the time. Not so they gave me the extra time to do it. The faculty and the staff at the campus really did give me a good help in making sure that I was on time with stuff and checking up on things. But yeah, I guess the main way I got through it was dealing with less sleep and increasing my coffee intake.
And just on that, did you have any tips or ways of studying that you could share with some of our students or people on the line here thinking of studying, and how you went about progressing through the course?
Yeah, sure. I mean, all of it was very interesting. So once I got through understanding finance and the mechanics around financial investments and financial engineering, the way things worked, it was all really interesting. So I really enjoy learning new things, and that sort of curiosity drove me and pulled me through a lot of the work. So enjoying what I was learning and working towards that goal of helping me to change careers really got me through the work.
Awesome. All right, I might just leave it there if that's okay, and we'll jump to Lindsay, but you'll stay on the line, and if we've got any Q&A at the end from our audience, it'd be great to have you answer some of those questions.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ash. I just had one question for you, Morgan, if it's okay, just to round that conversation out. How daunting was it to move from not being involved in finance to studying a formal finance degree?
It was pretty daunting. I'll be honest. It took me probably halfway through the first two core subjects before I started really getting it. Things like the financial instruments course, which is one of the first core courses I remember particularly, very interesting. But as an engineer, I struggled a little bit to come to terms with the fact that financial engineering was different to the engineering I'd studied, and inputs and outputs change what the outcome is. Whereas in financial engineering, as long as the insides are the same or the inputs and outputs are the same, you can do whatever you want in between and it still gets to the same result. Yep. So coming to terms with a different style of thinking and a different way to solve problems was quite daunting. But once I got it, it was very rewarding and enjoyable.
Excellent, excellent. And that's one of the purposes of we're talking about some of these concepts today. So thank you very much for that.
No worries.
Ash, do you want to take it from here? In fact, I think it's me, isn't it? My apologies. I've jumped in too early. Okay. There we go, Ash. We're on the right point. We're at the right point now.
We're on now. So we'll just quickly run through. We've just heard from Morgan, and now Lindsay's going to give us a rundown of why you should study finance and why it's pretty important with things happening in the current global environment.
Excellent. Okay, so we've spoken to Morgan. Now I want to talk to you about why it's now more than ever it is important to get finance, and therefore why you should enroll in our graduate certificate of finance. In case I haven't met anyone on the webinar before, my name is Lindsay Bryan. I'm the director of the Applied Finance Centre. The graduate certificate of finance is one of the courses that we offer through the centre. And this is a course actually I'm a lecturer on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But first of all, I wanted to get into a little bit about why we should be interested in finance and why it's more important now than ever to get finance. And on that first topic, it's always good to start with a little bit of a Google definition, see what Google puts in the auto search when you put in finance is. And you can see there that some interesting things in there. The second top one is finance is fun. I fully endorse that, but many people won't. And I'm sure that at the start of it, Morgan didn't think it was fun either. The lifeblood of industry is a good one. I'm not sure what Quizlet has to do with finance. Apparently it's flashcards. I didn't know that until I looked it up myself. Finance is cool, all for that too. But what we might do as a little bit of a kicker to get people involved a little bit more in this and get you thinking about is to run through this little poll. So all I'd ask you to do is to select something that you think speaks to you, and then we'll give it a little bit of time, and then we'll have a look at the results. So please vote away. Okay, how are we going there, Ash? We've got a few votes coming in.
We do. I'll give it a couple more seconds. They're going up and down. No one said finance is cool yet, unfortunately.
Oh, come on.
All right, I'll shut the poll off.
Okay, and let's see the results. The lifeblood of business. I thought it might be the main one, but that's good. It is certainly a study. Some people think it's fun. 2 of you think it's fun. Fantastic. Loving that. And a gun too. Excellent. Well, I think we'll come back to that question later, because what I'd like to do is take you on a little bit of a journey about why it's important to understand finance and what we can do about that. So the next slide is a pretty simple one. Once you've finished with Google, go to the dictionary. So you'll notice that the title is why it's important to get finance. Now, obviously, everyone needs finance, and now more than ever, because we are in a situation where a lot of people need to finance their operations, they need to finance their business, they need to keep things going. And that's the traditional method, the traditional definition. The one I'm interested in are the two at the off to the right there, the informal one and the archaic one, which is about studying, is that you need to understand finance. You need to understand how finance works. You need to understand how finance operates. And this is the very topic that Morgan was alluding to when he came from an engineering background to looking at finance, is you need to understand how that particular system works. And the system it is. Okay, so one of the first things we should do is obviously think about, well, money is the lifeblood of finance, but what is money? And which of these is money? It sounds like it's a really simple question, but it's not. Now we have another poll here, which Ash will put up in just a second. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to say which you think is money. Is it the rum bottle? Is it the Roman coin, or the cowrie shell? Have a think, have a vote. You can actually select more than one if you want to.
All right.
Okay, how are we going with that? Very good. Yep, the Roman coin is absolutely, on the face of it, going to be money. I can't disagree with that. And in fact, it was considered money in a lot of places. But you are, in fact, all right. All of these things were money at various stages. Rum bottles, famously in Australia, rum was a currency in the very early days of the colony. Roman coins, obviously in Rome and other countries. Then the cowrie shell was also a form of currency in certain islands in the Pacific at various stages. So as you can see, money can be anything. Money can be what is accepted. Money can be simply something that helps commerce work. So it is in many ways the lifeblood of finance. And we can probably close that poll off now, Ash, and we'll move on. Now, money is very much changing, and this is about Australia, but you could say that about anywhere. Once upon a time, people used to write checks for a lot of things. They don't do that anymore. You can see here that the rate of change in check payments is approaching minus 20%. That's a dramatic reduction, and they are now almost irrelevant. And you can see in that chart there in the middle that the forms of payment are changing dramatically. Now, the little red dots there are cash. They are coming down dramatically. If I was to actually look at this now, I would say that cash would be almost at zero. There's almost no one accepting cash now for anything. Mostly it's going to be cards, and the really predominant form of payment these days is debit and credit cards. So they are the payment mechanisms that everyone looks at. Now, checks are still there, mostly in the form of bank payments. So banks are the ones that are mostly using them for high value transactions. And the most common form of that is actually payments for houses, which are still pretty much being done with check, although gradually they're being converted to electronic payments. And electronic payments are becoming a much broader category, and that's one of the categories that we'll talk a little bit more about. But I think one of the other important things to understand is that finance is very important for the economy. Sorry, I've just got to get that going. Households, finance sector, industrial sector, they all work together. It's quite a complex system because obviously there's deposits that go into the finance sector, there's investments in the industrial sector, we get home loans from the finance sector, we get paid by the industrial sector, finance sector lends money or invests in the industrial sector, and we as householders put superannuation away in the finance sector. Okay, so that's normally how it works, but it's not how it works at the moment, because what's happening? Well, most of the industrial sector is really struggling to operate. So they are actually having to borrow or raise equity just to keep themselves alive because they don't have the income that they would normally expect to get from sales. Equally, investments are not paying dividends in most cases because companies are trying to conserve cash. But what they are trying to do is to try and to raise money so that they can keep paying their people. Equally, the government is stepping in to help pay the salaries of all those people as well. A lot of households aren't able to make savings deposits because they don't really have a lot of spare cash now. Their home loans are pretty static because they can't actually make any reductions. And we've actually got the situation now where in extreme circumstances, households are able to access early access to their super. So we're seeing some of these relationships all change. And that is a dramatic change, and it needs to be understood what the effect is going to be. Now, one of the areas where there has been the most effect is actually in the payment system itself. Don't worry about the title. This is actually about how the fast settlement serves. So if you've ever used OSCO or used the new payments platform, this is what's going on in the background. There's a whole lot of these electronic transactions processes which are now critical infrastructure because no one's using cash. So the only way you can pay something to someone that you owe is either through a credit card or actually transferring money to them. And this is a way to do that. And so what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot more of these sorts of transactions coming through the statistics during this period, simply because people aren't using cash. So making these payment systems work and keep going is really important. Okay. So let's turn to what's happening to bank assets. And this is a really interesting couple of graphs because the periods that we're choosing are at different ends. So back in the 1980s, banks were very restricted in what they could do. They could take deposits, they could make a certain number of loans, and they invested in Commonwealth government securities. They didn't really do much more than that. And then after deregulation, they were able to do a lot more than that. And so what happened was that we actually saw a situation, we've seen a situation now where in 2018, deposits aren't the major funder for banks. Bonds are pretty important, as are other liabilities. It actually at one stage got to the point in 2008 where deposits were approaching 40% of the funding for banks, and short-term loans were a major portion of what funded them. And this helped with creating the global financial crisis. What has happened is the amount of loans have stayed roughly the same, but they do have securities which aren't Commonwealth government securities. They tend to be corporate loans or corporate bonds, and the other assets are predominantly derivatives. So there's a change in the structure and the way that banks operate. And understanding these changes is really important to understand how finance is going to work in the current economy, and then also how it's going to work in the future. How much are people going to have available to invest or to put away in deposits? This then will affect how banks are able to lend money. Now, at the moment, a lot of banks are lending money based, in the US in particular, based on what the government is prepared to support. But it won't always be that way. Eventually they have to come out of it, and it's a matter of what happens at the end of that. And the study of finance enables us to understand how those things can work together. Now, the COVID impacts are really interesting because here is a situation where we have, if you like, the ethics dilemma of the trolley problem writ large. Because we've got a situation where what do you do to try and stop an enormous amount of your population from being infected with this virus and therefore potentially dying and reducing the working population. And to do that, they've actually had to shut the whole place down. So the top three concerns I think are really interesting. Yep, absolutely. Potential global recession. We'll be pretty assured that that's going to happen because industrial production has dramatically reduced. They're also worried about what that means for liquidity and capital resources. And you've seen this with companies now raising money to try and keep themselves afloat over the period during which they can't produce. The effect on the workforce and reduction in productivity is huge. We've already seen that with the queues of people lining up for skill share payments. You know, they are literally out of a job, and so they need support. And it's also consumer confidence. Now, one of the things that sort of countervails that is that those that do have roles and do have jobs and are getting paid are doing more online shopping these days, but eventually that will sort of ease back a bit too. The one that I found surprising out of that one on the left there is the supply chain issues, because this is very much a supply chain issue. What's happened is that people's supply chains and even their value chains have been impacted by COVID. And it's preventing a lot of things from happening. There's been some rapid pivots as people have tried to change the way that they do their business. When you look at the right-hand side, this was something that part of Accenture put out, a paper talking about what happened to the stimulus payment that was provided by the government. So under certain conditions, you got a $750 payment. Interesting here is that most of it was actually saved. It wasn't actually spent as was probably intended. But then the other things that it was spent on, like groceries and clothing, rent, etc., are the sort of things you would expect to see a payment like that being devoted to. And all of these things are studies that you would do in terms of finance degree. This is what you would look at. What happens with all these things? Another really important part of any of our finance degrees, and the graduate certificate of finance is no different, is to helping businesses understand that there is a difference between profit and cash flow. Now, in normal times, this is trying to encourage businesses to understand that making a profit doesn't necessarily mean that you've got cash flow to spend. But there's an actual counterpoint to this, that in this situation, sometimes losses don't mean no cash flow. And that's a difficult thing to get across to people, because they think that, well, if a company's lost money, surely it has no cash flow. But in actual fact, they can be earning some cash, even though their profit may be, they may be incurring a loss. And understanding why that is important, how that happens, is a really important part of some of the units in the Graduate Certificate of Finance. So I can guarantee that anyone who does the Graduate Certificate of Finance and does the financial statements and modelling unit will be able to answer that question. Equally, when it comes to infrastructure projects, then it's really important to understand finance there too. So if you've got something like a WestConnex, which if you're in Sydney, you'll know is a massive road project throughout the centre of Sydney. Now, parts of that have actually been built and have been sold to Transurban. Other parts are still under construction, and there is actually a project at the moment undergoing where they are looking to sell those assets. And, you know, Transurban would probably be the likely beneficiary of that, and they'll buy them. But we don't know that. Who is going to buy that? How do you set up the financing for something like a WestConnex so that you can construct your project and then actually sell it to party that wants to buy it, and that they can actually finance that themselves. These are really complex financial questions, and you have to understand finance to be able to do that. Now, there will doubtlessly be a number of engineers working in this project who will need to keep half an eye on how that financing will work. And to do that, often they're in the situation that Morgan found himself, where they need to understand more about finance. So they go and learn about finance through our degrees, and they are able to handle these questions. A really important destination. But it's often not just the projects. It's how things go together. At the strategy and planning level, do you understand all of the stakeholders? Do you understand who's involved? Do you understand how these instruments work? If someone offers you a form of finance, do you actually understand how that works? A smart investment banker will offer you wonderful things. If they offer you a green bond, do you know how that works? All of these things require a knowledge of finance. And this is where these degrees come in really important, become really important. And then at the asset recycling area at the end, you really need to make sure that you're understanding how someone is going to finance one of these assets if you're looking to sell it to them. Because otherwise you will find it difficult to sell if no one is in a position where they can finance it. Now, the need's not always obvious. And it's interesting when you look at a project like Inland Rail. I don't know if you've heard of Inland Rail. It is actually a project to run an inland railway in the outback of Australia so that it avoids that sort of Sydney-Melbourne corridor, which is so busy. This is a major project. One of the interesting things is that it crosses a lot of territory that is not what you'd expect to normally encounter a rail project. And in doing that, it crosses, I think it's something like 7 land councils in outback Australia. So all of those land councils need to negotiate with Inland Rail to make sure that it's accounting for Indigenous sensitivities. Because if they don't, then they could find themselves in trouble. So they have to negotiate how they get access to that land. And then that leads to discussions about how it's financed. How do you finance something like that? And what happens with any payments that they make to the land councils to compensate them for crossing their land? All of these things are really important questions, and you need to understand finance to be able to deal with them. And then finally, regulation is always with us. Regulation will determine a lot of what happens in the future, because there are bound to be regulations. As we saw in this presentation through the RegTech Association recently, is you can almost guarantee that there'll be some form of regulation around businesses and disaster readiness. You can almost guarantee that even if there weren't regulations, businesses will look very hard at their supply chains to make sure that they are resilient and they can keep going in a situation where there's an impact on their workforce, on the workforce of another nation, or where they get their raw materials from. And equally, they're going to be looking at how resilient are their sources of finance. Now, we did see this in the 2008 in the global financial crisis, where a lot of people found that their source of finance had disappeared. But this is more widespread. This is not just finance. Finance is actually pretty well prepared for this. This is other sectors that are not ready and have sort of really cut themselves down to the point where they're most efficient, but it also meant that they were pretty vulnerable to a disruption in the supply chain. So this is a really important point, and one that you keep coming back to in finance, is making sure that you are ready and able to manage those risks. Okay, so that's a little bit of a background about why it's important to understand finance. And now I'll just throw then to Ashley. And Ashley, I'll leave it to you to start the conversation with Larissa.
Thanks, Lindsay. As Lindsay mentioned, we'll now hear from Larissa, who is another one of our fabulous alumni. Larissa completed her applied finance degree as a sports scholar and finished only just last year. During this time, she represented Australia numerous times in ultramarathon running and has worked in various consulting roles across Europe and Australasia. Larissa initially started the program as an analyst at New South Wales Treasury, wanting to learn the language of business. But she's now moved into an entrepreneurial role as Club World project lead at one of the Big Four. Larissa, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, everybody.
Hello, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
That's okay. I'll just kick off and ask you a question. Can you share with us your journey so far studying the Master of Applied Finance? What made you decide to do the Masters and how has it changed or shaped your career to date?
Yeah, so my journey, I started a very, very long time ago. I started in mid 2013. So back then my intention in signing up for the program was to learn the language of business. So my background was more econometrics and language, and I felt sort of working at New South Wales Treasury where I was at the time that a gap that I had, just understanding finance. So I signed up with that intention and got that plus a bit more, a lot more really, throughout the 6 years that I was studying there. So so the journey really as sort of went along the core units, which were really helpful in understanding that sort of language of business. So really kind of getting into detail around finance. And then what I found really, really valuable were the electives and really getting to know there's such a breadth of offering in the course. So I particularly enjoyed professional practice as well as independent projects. So it's quite a lot of scope to really tailor the thesis that you write to be about what you're doing at work at the time. So one of my pieces was on a startup program I was running in the Philippines for work, and part of the experience working with Dan, who is my lecturer, was linking me into various venture capitalists to understand what it is that they're after from a perspective of when someone's pitching to them, what are they looking for? And that kind of opportunity I probably wouldn't have had had I not been in that course. It really gave me that sort of academic rigor to the piece of work that I was working on for that startup academy. And then the second, I guess it's kind of like an elective, but it is a core unit, professional practice. You write a thesis, and at the time I was sort of using that as part of helping me apply a bit more academic rigor to a business case I was working on at work. So it's really applied. So I think the course is definitely not theoretical, and that's sort of been really, really valuable for me over my 6-year journey studying the course.
Awesome. And I guess on that, did you have maybe some tips for students thinking of joining or further studies, how you juggle all your sports stuff, your work stuff, study stuff?
Yeah, I think being open with your lecturers and sort of upfront around some of the commitments that you have. So also, I guess, having those relationships with the lecturers too. I think they're overall very, very supportive as a university. I think Macquarie is very supportive of your life, your work, your other extracurricular endeavours. So being upfront is one important aspect of that. And also sort of being conscious around where your limits are. So I find the core units is sort of definitely require a bit more time commitment than the electives. So I chose to do an elective unit the semester I got married, for example, just knowing that there'll be a few other things going on in my life to put my time and attention to. So just kind of being mindful around your own capacity constraints and not being afraid to take a little longer if you need to. I think the experience is no different, or it's not less richer if you do take your time and really embrace it.
And I can see Lindsay's back on screen. Did you have any questions for Larissa, Lindsay?
I did have one. I know when I did my masters, I had frequent times when I'd have these little aha moments where, you know, I'd look at something, I'd be doing something at work and not really know why I was doing it. And then in the course of my study, I'd discover why I was doing it. I'm wondering, Larissa and Morgan, were there any moments like that where you looked at something, where something happened in the course that you were able to say, oh, now I understand?
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Morgan?
I was kind of hoping you'd go first, but I guess in terms of my work, I kind of didn't use too much of the degree in my engineering day to day, other than understanding how project managers are forecasting costs over the life of a project. So, and then bringing that into present day dollars as they forecast the performance of a project over a 2 or 3 year time span. So that was probably the closest I got to an aha crossover between the study and the professional work.
It's a pretty big aha though, because time value of money is one of those topics that really catch a lot of people early on.
Yeah, so it was good and helped me kind of get in a little bit more with those senior guys, talking about it a bit more than other people could with them.
Larissa?
Yeah, I guess the topics and the courses that I really used based on the current work I was doing, as I mentioned before. So probably for me, it was really that independent project, because I made it a topic that was really relevant to what I was doing at work at the time. So it became a very entrepreneurial focused topic using finance. So I mean, I had no idea that's what venture capitalists thought. So for me, it was kind of getting that understanding from a different angle that I wouldn't have had exposure to otherwise. So yeah.
That's really good. Thank you very much for those perspectives, guys. So if it's okay, well, I'll ask you guys to hang on while we go through the remainder of talking about the degrees themselves, the degree itself, and then we'll have the Q&A. We've got opportunity for Q&A at the end. So hopefully you'll be able to answer a few questions for some of our students. So I might just flick on to why study with Macquarie. And whoops. I think that one of the first things I would say is that the graduate certificate of finance is really designed for people that have not had perhaps as much experience in finance, or they've got a degree in another discipline. So, you know, we've got a few examples here of the type of person we're talking about. You might have heard mentioned a couple of times about marriage, about having kids. It is quite common for people studying the graduate certificate of finance and the Master of Applied Finance to have young kids or to start having kids during that, the degree. It's a little bit of a sweet spot. It's a good time to actually study because you do have a little bit more time. I can guarantee you, having older kids, you do not have time later. You know, you might have someone who has comes from a non-finance background, needs to understand a little bit more about their business. You've got Steve there who really wants to know the nitty-gritty, wants to understand finance from the inside and out. Sandra works in finance, needs to understand a little bit more because she's, you know, doesn't have that undergraduate degree. Or you've got Phoebe who, in a similar way to Larissa, is involved in startups, in venture capital, and would like to understand how understanding finance can help her with her fintech or her working in a fintech. So these are all sorts of characteristics. They're not exclusive. This is just an example. So these are the sort of people that would generally undertake one of these degrees. I also see a lot of people involved in property valuation, people who are lawyers. You get a lot of people from all walks of life involved in many different industries who actually come through and do the graduate certificate. It is actually step one in an applied finance journey. So for people that don't have sufficient work experience or don't have a finance degree or both, then the graduate certificate of finance is a great entry point and then leads on to either the graduate diploma or the Master of Applied Finance if they want. You don't have to. You can actually just do the graduate certificate of finance, spend a year doing that part-time, and then you have a graduate certificate. You've got essentially a bachelor's degree in finance and you can walk away at that point. It is quite common for people then partway through to say, you know what, I want to actually go on and do my master's or do my graduate diploma. And that is available as well. It's an integral part of the Master of Applied Finance. It does lead straight through to the Master of Applied Finance if you'd like. Now, what you can expect through the Graduate Certificate of Finance, one of the things about this degree is completely online. So this is a degree where you can do it from your own home, from wherever you are. We do have a number of students who do this from another country. It's quite common, and you are able to do so because it is completely online. Now, we try to introduce some interactive elements to that. We're getting really practiced at it at the moment because that's the only way we actually provide any classes. But equally in these classes, we have activities which occur each week. We have discussion forums to enable interaction between students. And we also are starting to run more webinars and Q&A sessions where we go through some of the concepts. There's a bunch of videos in every unit which explain the concepts broadly and lead you through all the activities that you would do. But I would say that in most cases, these are not your traditional classes where you've got someone lecturing you about something. This is a guided pathway to learning about the topic. So what we'll do is we'll give you access to a number of resources or lead you to a number of areas where you can learn more about the particular topics. And then we have exercises and assessments which are then designed to give you that insight and to enable you to apply that knowledge to some real world examples. It is very work friendly. I mean, the online content is designed so that you can do it during the evening, you can do it after work, and indeed the Master of Applied Finance itself has been mentioned a couple of times, is very work friendly. In any case of lectures where we have face-to-face classes, they're always after work or on weekends, so it enables people to work while they're doing their study. So it's quite common, and it's most common, that people who do both the Graduate Certificate of Finance and the Master of Applied Finance actually have roles already, have jobs, and they then use the degree itself to either develop their career further with their current employer, or in some cases, people have gone on to other careers. In fact, I know Larissa mentioned that the good use she put to her paper or thesis in professional practice. I've had people who have completed their paper in professional practice turn that into their consulting business, or in other cases have used that to get a job in another organization. And it is all about applied finance. Someone asked the question in the Q&A, how was applied finance different to normal finance? The clue is in the name. It is applied. This is actually using finance in a real world environment, not just theory. You've got to understand the theory, but you need to be able to apply it in real world examples. And that is very much what this degree and the Master of Applied Finance are designed to do. So the Graduate Certificate of Finance is done as 4 units, each of 10 credit points. You need to have the 40 credit points to get the degree. It costs $320 per credit point, so that's $12,800 over a year. If you were to do this part-time, you would do one on each of 4 terms. You would do it in any order, and we run 2 of the units each term. So in any term, you have the opportunity to do a different unit. We give you access to the learning platform, we give you access to the study materials, the library, you get access to the lecturers, and also the student support team. So there's everything you need to complete this degree is provided to you online. And that includes online access to the library. Okay. The other things we give you access to sessions not unlike this. Normally we have large sessions where we have a large number of people in a room, and we get industry speakers and academics to talk through topical issues. We also have networking events for graduates, for alumni, and often those involve some sort of learning activity as well. There's also the opportunity to go on and study other degrees within the university. So within the business school, we do run other post-experience programs such as the MBA and the Global MBA, which is again online. And then there are other areas within the business school which cover other areas of business. Okay, some of the details. We take in new students each term in the Graduate Certificate of Finance. Term 3 commences on the 15th of June. Applications close later this month, and the application process is pretty simple. It's online, and it's available via that website at the bottom. The term commences on the 15th of June and finishes at the end of August, and then term 4 commences in September and finishes just at the beginning of December. In each case, we provide all exams and assessment pieces online. So if there is an exam, it's generally going to be an online exam, and it'll be done through our interactive online system. In other cases, you might provide something like a paper or a case study, in which case you submit that online too. We're also available for personal consultations. You can contact the Future Students team at postgraduate@mq.edu, or you can phone them on Monday to Friday. And we're happy to organise those as Zoom sessions or as teleconferences, or just a simple phone call just to answer any questions. And once we're up and about and back in the office, obviously we're happy to have personal consultations there too. And so I might throw back to Ashley, and we can look at some other questions that might arise.
Thanks, Lindsay. I can see a few questions coming in. Everyone who's still on the line, feel free to send them through. We've got Morgan and Larissa still here if you've got any questions about the student experience. I'll ask Angus's question first. He's asking, are there networking events to connect students with various organisations? And what makes this program different from other pre-experienced master's programs?
Would you like me to answer that one?
Sure.
So the networking events are really there to do that, to connect people with other students, with other alumni, and also people from industry. So yes, it's very much trying to get people together and talking as a community. And it is generally also designed to help you learn about what's going on. The last thing we want is for someone to complete the degree and think, okay, I know everything and I'll never have to learn again. This is the first step in a journey. You need to make sure that you are keeping up to date with everything that's going on in the industry. And these are a great way to do that. So at the moment, we're a bit challenged because we can't have the standard seminar that we would normally have, which is either at lunchtime or after work. And they're normally face-to-face. We'll have a series of interactive sessions online coming up pretty soon. So we'll be able to do them online as well. In terms of what makes it different from pre-experienced master's programs, I've kind of answered that already in the presentation, but just to emphasize, these courses are very much post-experience. People doing these courses have generally been working before. They have been working for a number of years in another context. In the case of Morgan, he was an engineer, and Larissa was already working, I think, you were at KPMG then, weren't you, when you started? So people have been working for a while. This is not a master's. The graduate certificate is designed to give you a bachelor's effectively. The master's is designed not to be just a follow-on from a bachelor's degree. It's for people who've been working for a while.
Thank you. And I might just see if Morgan or Larissa can give some insights into maybe not those formal networking sessions, but the informal networks that you build in the classroom through the face-to-face interactions with other students that you're working with in group projects. Is there any kind of insights either of you would like to share about that?
Yeah, I think overall, as I said, the lecturers is a great experience of getting to know them and working really closely with them. And I still have some really strong relationships with a lot of my lecturers in my career. From a people perspective, my classmates, I'm still part of the WhatsApp group for math, even though I'm not really part of the course anymore, but it just goes to show that you really do develop some strong relationships through that course, both on a professional front as well as a personal level. So you kind of really get to know the people that you're that you're doing the classes with. And I think there's a strong encouragement in terms of working together and collaborating in terms of sort of insights around what we're getting out of the course. So I think overall, I really enjoyed that front of the course. It's not just been about go there, go home. It's been really a rich experience from that front, from a relationship level.
Thank you. Morgan, did you have anything else you'd like to add?
I'd probably just reiterate the same thing. I made some really good friends during the course who were like me, but also nothing like me, in that they were working, but they were in completely different careers and life stages. So there were some who were married, some who had been married for a while and had almost grown up kids, and some who were not. So you meet a massively wide variety of people in a wide variety of careers. So you get a huge perspective on how these things are applied, whether it's in real estate development or in trading or in bank treasuries. So it was really rewarding. And I also got on quite well with a number of my lecturers that I still talk to. They still sometimes chat to me as well for info on certain stuff that I'm doing. So it's a connection and a network that goes on for quite a while.
Thank you. And I might just ask another question from Matt, who's asked, Lindsay, this might be one for you, but can you do the graduate diploma and the master's online, or is it just the grad cert?
Well, generally no, but at the moment, yes, because everything's online. This is something that often comes up. Obviously we've got people from all over the world doing the graduate certificate. It's a bit harsh then to require people to come in face to face. So we are trying to work out ways we can offer more of our courses online. There are other master's degrees that are online. The Global MBA is one of them. However, what we're trying to do is to work out how we can actually offer these in the future so that there is a choice or maybe some options that are part online, part face to face. So it's just the grad cert at this stage, which is online. But we'd love to hear more from what you're looking for in the grad dip and masters and whether we can come up with something there.
Thank you. And another question is, how does the masters compare to a CFA?
How does it compare? They are quite different. I mean, essentially the CFA, you sign up, you get delivered a whole lot of paperwork and books. And then you sit an exam, and getting to that exam point is really down to you. So one of the things that we do have is we do have a lot of people that do the masters and the CFA. So a lot of people finish their masters, then go on and do their CFA, and some people have done the CFA and come and do their masters. And in general, the reason they do is they want the face-to-face element. So they find the face-to-face side of it, the interactive side, a little bit more useful to the way that they study. And they do then go on and do the CFA. They do complement each other. The CFA is quite technical. It's quite good on technical knowledge. We use the CFA throughout some of our courses. I use it in the course that I teach in the graduate certificate. But it is a slightly different way of approaching the qualifications.
Yeah, I can probably talk a bit more to that. So I was deciding between the two myself. I ended up doing the masters and my husband ended up doing CFA. So we can sort of simultaneously, we're both doing the same thing, but differently. And I guess, I think, yeah, as you said, it's the experience definitely for the masters of applied finance that you get a lot more than you do for CFA. So CFA is definitely a lot around knowledge and I guess, yeah, it's a lot of solo study. Whereas the masters, I think, as we talked about before, was building those relationships, getting a bit more of the other angle of finance that you wouldn't get as much in CFA around, your written pieces and developing topic areas of interest as well. So, I think personally, the masters is much more of a richer experience. We're going for it from the experience angle, from a knowledge and sort of content perspective. I think it's also broader, but having said that, CFA is also, there's definitely, it's in depth, but as is a master's on the technical side. So that's just my own personal opinion on the two.
Perfect, thank you. And just another one for both Morgan and Larissa. Did you have a favourite topic or favourite unit that you found interesting, and can you share your experience with that?
I think I've already spoken to my favourites, and they've been all really the electives. Yeah, so I've really enjoyed that sort of the applied aspect of all the electives that I did. So all the applied portfolio management side of things, and Dan Dogard's fantastic lecturer. So kudos to him as well for the way he runs those courses. They're fantastic. And we particularly, I've got no background in portfolio management, but I really, really enjoyed the content as well as the way I was able to apply it with his teaching lens, and also the elective units where we got to choose our topics. So the independent project, as well as the professional practice unit. So I personally really, really like the electives. I mean, the core subjects give you the groundwork, but the electives just, I think they're just another level.
Thank you. And Morgan, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I did mine a little while ago, doing it starting in 2009. So it's hard to remember exact subjects. I do remember, and Dan Dugard is someone I'm in contact with semi-regularly as well. I remember him as being an excellent lecturer as well. I did enjoy the electives were really cool. And they brought a lot more of the real world into what we were doing. So I think some of the ones that do stand out for me were around carbon financing and infrastructure modeling, infrastructure project modeling. So using real companies to value and interrogate, and real projects to look at the financials. So that was really interesting and enjoyable for me.
Excellent. Sounds like Dan's a bit of a superstar.
Yeah, it's pretty special, Dan.
And we've just got a question come through from Dennis, and it says, if someone wasn't in the finance industry and they don't have a finance background, would it be hard to start this degree?
It's not hard to start it. I guess it's like anything where you're not aware of, you're not au fait with that topic. You're going to find it difficult, but once you do get through it, it'll be fine. I think this is a degree which is designed to help people understand finance. So the graduate certificate helps you understand finance a little bit better. It prepares you to do more work in finance or to study more in finance. So I wouldn't worry about not having a background in the finance industry or no financial background at all. You will interact with finance in some way in what you are doing. So really it's a case of understanding the plumbing that is behind it and the reasons why things work. So if you've got an interest in it, you'll be fine. If you're not interested, it's not going to help you because you've really got to want to know what's going on.
Perfect. And I think we're almost out of time, but any questions that were unanswered, we'll get in touch with you after the session and make sure you've got all the information you're looking for. Just before we go, we'd like to say big thanks to Morgan and Larissa again for taking their time to join us today and share their experiences. I know it's invaluable to hear from students that have gone through the program and hear firsthand what it's been like. And lastly, Lindsay, I think you've got one more poll you'd like to do with those that are still here. So
yes, if we're going to put up the poll that we used first again, and we're going to ask people to vote again, and let's just see whether people have changed their mind about what finance is. Is it fun? I'm wanting more fun, please, or cool. But I'm sure that we'll see that it's still the lifeblood of business, but I'd like to see some of those other ones as well. So please vote. A big thank you to Morgan, Larissa, Ash for being a great host. It's great to have these sessions. Thank you all for coming along. That's fantastic. And yes, watch out because we've got more sessions coming up. The professional education side are doing stuff. The alumni team are doing stuff, and we're going to do stuff online as well to make sure that people keep communicating and keep hearing what's going on in industry. So Ash has got the results there. It's crucial now. That's excellent. Thank you, guys. Thanks very much, guys. A few more fun, a lot more cool. That's what I wanted to see. So thank you very much for that. And thank you all for coming along today. Ash, I'll hand back to you.
thank you.